We thought on Sunday about the difference between people who become Christians and people who become disciples of Jesus. Main difference is that when it comes to keeping a clear conscience, the key question for a disciple is, have I done everything the Master wanted me to? Whereas a Christian only needs to say, I've done nothing wrong at the end of the day, and he can go to bed and sleep the sleep of the righteous. One is very active, the other almost entirely passive. One changes the world, the other changes nothing, in fact merges into the world with disastrous consequences for everyone. A passive Christianity, a passive church that's all about keeping a clean sheet with God. Who saw that coming? Well, Jesus. Read the parable of the talents in Matthew 25:14-30. Isn't it exactly this that we're being warned about with the miserable figure of the third servant in the story? We need to understand the role of a servant, not just to understand the story, but to understand our role here and now in history. Most of us do not have houses big enough to require one servant, let alone three. A servant is there to enable the master to make the most of his possessions. That role, that purpose in life, doesn't change just because the master happens to be away. His absence might mean that you have more responsibility with less supervision. No one is there to tell you exactly what you should be doing with your time. But you're still a servant, and however long he is away for, 5 minutes, 5 months, 5 years, you are still accountable to him for what you have been doing with your time and his property. The property in question in this case is money, lots of it. It would take an average day labourer 20 years to earn 1 talent. So 20 years of minimum wage, I reckon we're talking about £2 million being entrusted to the first servant, 800,000 to the second and 400,000 to the third. That's a high level of trust that they're being entrusted with, and each according to their ability. The master knows that they can do this, if they want to. One more thing about the sums involved being so large. It is actually quite difficult not to make money when you start off with sums like this. Stop for a moment and think about the truly massive wealth of heavenly resources that we have been entrusted with by our Master. You may want to pause the video and make a list. Servants 1 and 2 proceed to demonstrate the proper response to that kind of level of trust. They go at once to work and they put the master's money to work. And the master proceeds to demonstrate that this response was exactly what he was looking for. Well done, good and faithful servant. It's not the money that delights him, it's the goodness and faithfulness of the servant. And in case we're thinking that his delight is of the kind that says, hey, this servant has proved to be a resource that I can use to really squeeze the pips out of my investments, that's not it at all. The master wants them to share in his happiness, to be more partners than servants. They were put in charge of a few things according to their abilities, but their abilities have grown. Now they can be put in charge of many things. And that is how it is supposed to be with us between now and Jesus' return. But there is this third servant. He chose what he took to be the passive, risk-free, effort-free option of digging a single hole and burying his master's money. But now he finds himself accounting for unfaithfulness, and that can't be done. He tries to make it all the master's fault for being such a hard man. Well, that's not going to stand up, is it, after what we've just heard him say to the other servants? His argument is kind of, if I'd failed, you would have punished me. If I'd succeeded, well, what was in it for me? But that won't wash either. It was always the master's money. He is the master's servant. The generosity shown to the other two takes the ground from under this man's feet. Here is what belongs to you, he eventually stammers, but why keep a servant for that? The master could have dug a hole for his own money and saved himself a servant's wages. And this is it. In the end, by choosing the passive, risk-free, I'm not doing anything wrong option, the servant puts himself at great risk. In fact, ends up getting put out of existence. Assuming a hard master, he gets one. The unfaithful servant can be a servant no longer. it's a serious warning for us. If you're happy, thank you for listening.